So I use this term, the Christian Carnival, and I don't mean any disrespect in that, and I don't mean to offend anybody in calling the facade of faith that is so easy to live into in our world the Christian Carnival. I mean no offense by that. Obviously, I don't mean any offense by that. At least I hope that's clear that I don't mean any offense by that. But as someone who was participating in the Christian Carnival, what I began to see in my own life is that it was about the production. It was about the show. It was about Sunday mornings. It was about the talk I was going to give on Wednesday evenings. It was about how I was going to come across. It was about how I was going to manage the image that I was presenting rather than actually living into a life of faith. And I think that it's so easy for us to do that in our world today. I think we as Americans especially are conditioned to care more about how we're being perceived than the reality of how we are actually living. And I think that that's what the Christian Carnival means, or that's what I mean by the Christian Carnival, is when we as followers of Christ begin to care more about how we're being perceived than how we are actually living. We begin to care more about what people think about our religion or our faith or our life in Christ than we actually cultivate and intentionally seek to foster our life in Christ. And I think that we begin to see the fractures of that all over the place. I think we begin to see the fractures of that in our church. In our churches. I think we begin to see the fractures of that in our institutions. I think we begin to see the fractures of the Christian Carnival coming through in our own lives. And I think that one of the most clear indications of the fractures that the Christian Carnival can cause in our life is the presence of despair. The presence of being overwhelmed, the presence of being completely convinced that all of it is out of control, that all of it is overwhelming, and that all of it is without life, that all of it is without God's presence. When we begin to seek or we begin to sense that in our lives, the sense of despair, the sense of overwhelmedness, the sense of things being completely out of control, I have found time and again, if I look at it, it's because what I'm tending to do is to try and manage perception and try and manage image as opposed to actually cultivating these sources of life, these sources of nourishment, these deep oases, these deep places of living water, of life in our spiritual faith and in our following after Christ. So I think when I begin to sense that notion of despair, that sense of frenzy, that sense of just a blur, it's all becoming a blur, that's when I think I've become to know and come to realize that I'm living more into the Christian Carnival, and thus all the more invitation to seek to step back, to seek places of silence, to seek places of restoration, to seek places of listening to that still small voice of God and what God is up to in my life and in the world, and then to seek to enter into synergistic participation with what God is up to. So those are some of the flags, I think, that are indications that we're participating in the Christian Carnival: the sense of despair, the sense of frenzy, the sense of overwhelming doubt, in a sense, put it that way, that we are participating in the Christian Carnival.